The throne room of the Valorian Empire had seen many strange things in its long history. For 12,000 years, emperors had ruled from this very chamber. Wars had been declared here. Peace treaties had been signed here. Great heroes had knelt before the throne, and great villains had been sentenced to death. But nothing had prepared the court for what happened on that warm summer morning. Emperor Kelthos Varen VII stood before his assembled nobles. He was tall, even by Valorian standards, with scales that shimmered like liquid silver in the morning light. His eyes held the weight of 900 worlds, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of generations. "I have made a decision regarding my personal security," he announced. The nobles leaned forward. The emperor's safety was a matter of great importance. In the past decade alone, there had been 17 attempts on his life. 31 of his personal guards had died protecting him. The palace security was already the most advanced in the galaxy, but clearly something needed to change. "I am dismissing my entire personal guard," the emperor continued. Silence fell over the throne room. Then chaos erupted. Nobles shouted in protest. Advisors rushed forward with objections. The 47 warriors of the Imperial Guard stood frozen in shock, their ceremonial plasma lances suddenly feeling very heavy in their hands. High Counselor Vormesh pushed through the crowd. He was old. His scales faded to a dull gray, but his mind remained sharp. "Your Radiance, this is madness. You cannot leave yourself unprotected. The threats against your life are constant and growing." "I did not say I would be unprotected," the Emperor replied calmly. "I said I was dismissing my current guard. They will be reassigned to other duties befitting their skills and loyalty. In their place, I have appointed a new protector." He gestured toward the side door of the throne room. "Enter." The door opened, and a single figure walked in. She was small. That was the first thing everyone noticed. Where Valorian warriors stood over 8 feet tall, this creature barely reached 5.5 feet. Her skin was pale and soft, without scales or armor of any kind. Her hair was brown, pulled back in a simple knot. She wore plain clothes with no decorations or medals. She was human, Catherine. Perry walked across the throne room floor with steady steps. She did not hurry. She did not look nervous. She simply walked to the Emperor's side, turned to face the court, and clasped her hands behind her back. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of shock. This was the silence of horror. "Your Radiance," Wormesh said slowly. "Surely this is some kind of joke. This creature is human. A primitive. Their species only discovered faster than light travel 300 years ago. They are barely more than animals." Catherine's expression did not change. She had heard worse. "I am aware of what she is," the Emperor said. "That is precisely why I have chosen her." Grand Admiral Thelzara, commander of the Imperial fleet and the Emperor's own cousin, stepped forward. His scales had turned deep purple with anger. "This is an insult to every warrior in the Empire. I have served you since childhood, Kelthus. My loyalty is beyond question. And you would replace me with this? This thing? You are not being replaced, cousin. You will continue to command my fleet. But my personal safety will now be in the hands of Catherine Perry." "She cannot possibly protect you," Thelzara insisted. "Look at her. She has no claws, no scales, no natural weapons of any kind. A Valorian child could tear her apart. How is she supposed to defend you against trained assassins?" Catherine spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but somehow it cut through the noise of the court like a blade through cloth. "Admiral, I have a question for you." Thelzara's eyes narrowed. "Speak human. How many assassination attempts has the Emperor survived in the past 10 years? 17, the Admiral replied. "And how many of his guards died during those attempts?" Another voice answered. It was Lady Velmara, the ancient keeper of the Imperial Archives. 31, Catherine nodded. 31 of the finest warriors in your empire. Soldiers with claws and scales and weapons that could destroy buildings. They trained their entire lives to protect the Emperor. And still, the assassins kept coming. Still, the Emperor nearly died 17 times. She paused to let her words sink in. Do you know why the assassins kept succeeding? Because they studied your guards. They learned how Valorian warriors think, how they react, how they position themselves. Every assassination attempt was designed to exploit Valorian psychology. The killers knew exactly what your guards would do because your guards are predictable, and you are not. Thalzara demanded. I am human, Catherine said simply. No one in this galaxy knows how to predict what a human will do, including anyone who might want the Emperor dead. The court fell silent again. This time, Catherine could see them thinking, turning her words over in their minds. Emperor Kelthos spoke. I met with this woman 3 weeks ago when she arrived as part of a diplomatic exchange program. I asked her to assess my security. Do you know what she found? No one answered. She found 17 different ways to kill me. 17 methods that my guards had not considered, that my security experts had not anticipated. She identified weaknesses in my protection that no Valorian had ever noticed. He looked at Catherine with something like respect, and then she told me how to fix them. That proves nothing, Thalzara said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. It proves that humans see things we do not. It proves that their minds work differently from ours. And it proves that having a human as my protector will make every potential assassin in the galaxy think twice before attacking me. Catherine stood silently as the debate continued around her. She had expected resistance. She had not expected to be treated like a wild animal brought into a civilized gathering. But she had faced worse prejudice in her time. She had survived the Kelzak Wars when entire human colonies were burned from orbit. She had spent 5 years as a military advisor to alien governments, who treated her as barely more than a clever pet. She had learned that the best way to change minds was not through argument, but through results. The Emperor raised his hand, and the court fell silent. My decision is final. Catherine Perry will serve as my sole personal protector. Those who question this choice are welcome to observe her performance. I believe they will find their doubts answered in time. He turned and walked toward his private chambers. Catherine followed, 1 step behind and to the left. As she passed through the crowd of nobles, she felt their eyes on her. Some looked at her with disgust. Some looked at her with fear. A few, the wiser ones, looked at her with something like curiosity. She did not know if she could truly protect the Emperor. The threats against him were real and powerful. But she knew one thing for certain. She would rather die than fail. That was the human way. When they committed to something, they committed completely. The Valorians would learn this soon enough. 3 weeks passed after. Catherine Perry became the Emperor's bodyguard. The court watched her constantly, waiting for her to fail. They whispered about her in the corridors. They made jokes about the primitive creature who thought she could protect the most powerful being in the galaxy. They placed bets on how long she would last. Catherine ignored all of it. She had work to do. Every morning she woke before the sun rose. She walked through the palace, learning its corridors and hidden passages. She talked to servants and guards and minor officials. She asked them about their work, their families, their daily routines. She remembered their names. The nobles found this behavior strange. Why would the Emperor's protector waste time talking to cleaning women and kitchen staff? What could such lowly creatures possibly tell her about security? They did not understand. Catherine was not just gathering information, she was building a network. Every servant who liked her, every guard who trusted her, became her eyes and ears in places she could not always watch. Humans had learned long ago that the people at the bottom of any organization often saw things that those at the top missed. On the 21st day of her service, a kitchen worker named Telvas mentioned something interesting. His supervisor, a senior cook named Zelkesh, had been acting strangely lately. He came to work early and left late. He avoided conversations with his colleagues. He had stopped playing cards with his friends on rest days. Catherine filed this information away and kept watching. 3 days later, she noticed something else. Zelkesh had been assigned to prepare the Emperor's evening meal. This was not unusual by itself. Senior cooks often handled imperial meals. But Catherine had learned that Zelkesh had only recently been promoted to this position. The promotion had come from a minor official in the palace administration, someone with no apparent authority over kitchen assignments that night. Catherine asked the emperor's permission to screen his dinner before he ate it. "My food is already tested by the official tasters," the emperor pointed out. "With respect, Your Radiance, I would like to use my own methods." The emperor studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. "Very well." Catherine produced a small device from her jacket. It was a chemical scanner developed on Earth during the wars with the Kelzak. The Kelzak had loved using poisons. They had created toxins so subtle that standard detection methods could not find them. In response, human scientists had built scanners of incredible sensitivity. She held the device over the emperor's meal. The display lit up with warnings. "Poison," Catherine said calmly. "A neurotoxin derived from the venom of the Kathrani serpent. It was injected into the food through a microscopic hole in the serving dish. The amount is small enough that normal testing would not detect it, but large enough to kill within minutes." The emperor's scales shifted to a pale white. For a moment he looked genuinely shaken. Then his expression hardened. "Zelkesh. Almost certainly. But he is not working alone. Someone in the palace administration arranged his promotion. Someone with connections to outside interests. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Zelkesh broke under questioning within hours. He revealed that he had been recruited by agents of the Merchant Consortium, a powerful group of trading houses that had grown wealthy under the previous emperor's policies. The current emperor's reforms threatened their profits. They had decided that removing him was easier than adapting to change. Catherine tracked the conspiracy. Through the palace bureaucracy, she identified the official who had promoted Zelkesh, and the noble who had bribed that official, and the consortium agent who had recruited them all. Within a week, 12 people were under arrest. The court was impressed despite itself. High Counselor Warmesh summoned a private meeting of senior nobles to discuss what had happened. "She simply talked to people," he reported, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "She spent weeks having conversations with servants and minor workers. She noticed that Zelkuj was behaving differently. She connected that behavior to his sudden promotion. From there, she unraveled the entire plot." "That is her method?" Grand Admiral Thelzara demanded. "Gossip." "It is not gossip," said Lady Velmara, the ancient scholar. "It is intelligence gathering of a type we do not practice. The human treats every person in the palace as a potential source of information. She builds relationships. She earns trust. And then, when something unusual happens, people tell her about it because they like her. Humans call it networking," added Lord Threnkel, a veteran of many wars. "I encountered it during my time on the frontier. Human military officers would spend hours talking to local populations, learning about their concerns, their fears, their observations. They called it winning hearts and minds. We thought it was a waste of time. We were wrong. 6 weeks after the poisoning attempt, the second attack came. This one was more direct. A lone assassin with a plasma rifle had hidden in the rafters of the Grand Assembly Hall. The emperor was scheduled to give a public address to the court. The assassin had spent months studying the positioning of the palace guards. He knew exactly where the emperor would stand, exactly when the guards would be looking elsewhere, exactly where to aim for a killing shot he did not know about. Catherine Perry, standard protocol, placed the emperor's protector directly behind the throne, where they could watch for threats from the crowd. Catherine had abandoned standard protocol on her first day. She never stood in the same place twice. She moved according to patterns that made no sense to Valorian observers because they were not patterns at all. They were random. On the day of the address, Catherine was standing 3 feet to the left of her usual position. She was directly in the assassin's line of fire. The plasma bolt hit her in the chest. She went down hard. The court erupted into screaming chaos. Guards rushed toward the rafters. Nobles fled in every direction. The emperor himself started forward, his face twisted with shock, and then 8 seconds later, Catherine stood up. She was breathing hard. Her jacket was smoking slightly where the plasma bolt had struck. But she was alive and on her feet. The assassin stared in disbelief. He had hit her dead center. she should be a charred corpse on the floor. Instead, she was pointing at his position. Directing the guards toward him with calm efficiency, they captured him within minutes. Later, in the medical wing, the palace physician examined Catherine with something approaching awe. The plasma bolt should have burned through your body. How did you survive? Catherine opened her jacket to reveal a thin layer of flexible material underneath. Personal shield generator. Human design. The bolt was absorbed by the shield. But such technology requires enormous power sources. The generators I have seen are the size of cargo crates. Human engineers are good at making things smaller. The Emperor arrived shortly after. He stood beside her bed, while the physicians finished their examination. The shield had stopped the plasma, but the kinetic force had cracked 3 of her ribs. She would need several days to recover. You knew he would shoot at you, the Emperor said quietly. Not at me. At you, I suspected, Catherine admitted. Her voice was strained, but steady. The angle was wrong for a shot at you unless he was willing to risk hitting one of the guards. That meant his primary target was me. They wanted to remove you first. Yes, the consortium learned from their failure with the poison. They understood that I was the obstacle, so they tried to eliminate me before making another attempt on your life. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You took a plasma bolt for me. That is my job, your radiance. It is more than that. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. My Valorian guards were loyal. They would have fought for me. But none of them would have deliberately placed themselves in the path of an assassin's shot. That requires a different kind of commitment. Catherine shrugged, then winced as her ribs protested. Humans are stubborn. When we decide to protect something, we do not stop just because it might hurt us. The Emperor nodded slowly. I am beginning to understand why my court fears you.
Ow.
They should not fear me, Catherine replied. They should fear anyone who tries to harm you while I am watching. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the palace. The human had taken a plasma bolt to the chest and gotten back up. The human had survived what should have been a killing blow. The human was not just clever. The human was dangerous. The nobles stopped making jokes about her. They stopped placing bets on how long she would last. Instead, they began to watch her with new eyes, seeing not a primitive creature but something far more unsettling. They had underestimated humanity. They would not make that mistake again by the 6th month of Catherine Perry's service. The imperial court had developed a genuine terror of her. It was not the kind of terror that comes from violence. The Valorian nobles had lived their entire lives surrounded by warriors who could kill with a single blow. They understood that kind of danger. They knew how to deal with creatures who were bigger and stronger and more deadly than themselves. You showed them respect, you stayed out of their way, and you hoped they had no reason to hurt you. Catherine was different. She was small and soft and carried no visible weapons. She had never raised her voice in anger, never threatened anyone, never displayed any kind of aggression. She was polite to everyone she met, from the highest noble to the lowest servant. She smiled often and spoke gently, and yet the court was terrified of her. The fear had started small. After the poisoning attempt, nobles began to notice that Catherine seemed to know things she should not know. Private conversations that had taken place behind closed doors, secret meetings that had been carefully hidden from official eyes, plans that had not yet been put into action. Lord Kethvel was the first to experience this directly. He was a minor noble with ambitions of rising to the inner council. He had arranged a private meeting with a representative of a rival faction, hoping to trade information for political support. The meeting was set for late at night in his personal chambers. Far from any official function, Catherine was waiting in the corridor when the representative arrived. Good evening, she said pleasantly. I trust you are not lost. The guest quarters are in the East Wing. The representative, a merchant named Thouser, froze in place. I was merely visiting Lord Kethval, a social call between friends. Of course. Catherine's smile did not waver. I should mention that the Emperor takes a keen interest in the social connections of his court. He finds them very educational. Thouser left immediately. He did not return. Within a week, Lord Kethval's conspiracy had collapsed completely. His allies abandoned him one by one, suddenly unwilling to be seen in his company. Stories like this spread quickly through the palace. The human always seemed to know. She appeared in corridors where she had no business being. She asked innocent questions that somehow cut to the heart of hidden schemes. She smiled in ways that made guilty nobles break out in cold sweats. How does she know? Lady Velinara demanded at a secret gathering of concerned nobles. How does she always know? She watches, said Lord Threnkel grimly, but not the way our guards watch. Our guards look for weapons and sudden movements. They watch for obvious threats. The human watches everything else. She notices who speaks to whom. She sees who avoids certain topics. She observes who looks away when certain names are mentioned. It is as if she can read our minds, another noble muttered. Not your minds, said Lady Velmara. The ancient scholar had joined the gathering without invitation, as was her right. Your bodies. Your faces. Your movements. Humans evolved on a dangerous world, surrounded by predators who wanted to eat them and prey who wanted to escape them. They learned to read the intentions of other creatures through tiny signals. The way someone stands, the direction of their eyes, the tension in their muscles. She paused to let her words sink in. The human looks at you. She does not hear your words. She sees your truth. Every lie you tell, every secret you hide, every fear you carry. It is all written on your body, and she can read it as easily as you read a document. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. The idea was deeply unsettling. They had always believed themselves masters of political deception. Now they learned that a creature from a primitive species could see through their masks without effort. There's more, Velmara continued. I have been studying human history. Their species has spent most of its existence at war with itself. Thousands of years of conflict, betrayal, and intrigue. They have developed an instinct for treachery that no other species in the galaxy can match. You are saying they are naturally suspicious? Threnkel said slowly. I am saying that every scheme we might imagine, every plot we might consider, humans have already invented and defeated. They have been lying to each other and catching each other in lies since before our species learned to build stone tools. We are not dealing with primitives. We are dealing with experts. The gathering fell silent. In the corridor outside, footsteps approached and then faded away. No one looked to see who had passed, but several nobles shuddered anyway. Over the following months, Catherine's reputation continued to grow. She never had to accuse anyone directly. She never had to make threats. Her mere presence was enough to make conspirators nervous. Her attention was enough to make traitors confess. A young noble named Thelvash had been passing information to foreign agents. He had been doing this for years without detection. 3 days after Catherine began watching him closely, he surrendered himself to the palace authorities and confessed everything. When asked why, he said simply, she knew. She was going to find out eventually. I preferred to confess on my own terms. An admiral in the Imperial fleet had been embezzling funds from military accounts. He had hidden his crimes behind layers of false records and bribed officials. Catherine spent one dinner party asking him polite questions about his family estates. The next morning, he returned every stolen credit and resigned his commission. A group of merchants had been conspiring to manipulate grain prices, causing shortages in the outer colonies. Catherine had one brief conversation with their leader at a social gathering. Within a week, the entire conspiracy had dissolved, and the merchants had begun donating to famine relief efforts. She did not threaten them. High Counselor Wermesh reported to the Emperor after investigating these incidents. She did not accuse them of anything. She simply made them aware that she was watching, and that was enough. Humans have a saying, the Emperor replied thoughtfully. The guilty flee when no one pursues. I do not understand. Those who have done wrong are already afraid. They live in constant terror of being discovered. Catherine does not create their fear. She simply reminds them that it is justified. Not everyone in the court lived in fear of the human. Some of the wiser nobles had learned to appreciate her. They noticed that Catherine never moved against those who were simply ambitious or competitive. She targeted only those who genuinely threatened the emperor or the stability of the empire. Those who kept their scheming within acceptable limits had nothing to fear from her. Lady Velmara became something of a friend to Catherine. The ancient scholar was too old and too wise to fear anyone, and she found the human fascinating. "You have done something remarkable," Velmara told her one evening. "You have made this court more honest through nothing but your presence. I have served 6 emperors, and I have never seen anything like it." Catherine shrugged. "Humans are good at making other creatures uncomfortable. We have been doing it for a very long time, but you do not enjoy it, do you? The fear, the way they look at you." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "No," she admitted. "I would prefer to be trusted rather than feared. But trust must be earned, and I have only been here for 6 months. For now, fear will keep the Emperor safe. Trust can come later, and if it never comes, if they fear you forever—" Catherine smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Then I will have done my job. That is what matters. Not whether they like me, but whether the Emperor lives." Velmara studied her for a long moment. "You are a strange creature, Catherine Perry. But I think I am beginning to understand why the Emperor chose you." "Because I am unpredictable?" "No," the old scholar said. "Because you care. Not about power or glory or wealth. You care about keeping your word. About protecting those who depend on you. About doing what is right even when it is difficult." She paused. "That is rare in any species. Perhaps it is the most human thing about you." Catherine did not know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and returned to her work. The court continued to fear her. The Emperor continued to trust her. And somewhere in the darkness, enemies continued to plot. She would be ready for them. When they came, on the anniversary of Catherine's first year of service, a diplomatic delegation arrived from the Kathrani Dominion. The Kathrani were ancient rivals of the Valorian Empire. Their species had evolved on a swamp world far across the galaxy. They looked nothing like the scaled humanoids of Valoria. The Kathrani were serpentine, with long, flexible bodies covered in scales that could change color to match their surroundings. Their movements were fluid and hypnotic. Their eyes never blinked. The two empires had been at peace for 2 centuries, but it was an uneasy peace. Old grudges ran deep. Trade disputes simmered constantly. Military forces watched each other across the border with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. The delegation was led by Ambassador Seshrel, one of the most cunning diplomats in the known galaxy. She had negotiated treaties that reshaped interstellar politics. She had orchestrated the downfall of 2 rival empires through nothing but words and patience. She came to the Valorian capital with an entourage of 40 attendants and a smile that revealed too many teeth. Catherine requested permission to conduct her own security screening of the delegation. "This is an insult," Ambassador Seshrel declared when she heard about the request. Her scales shifted to a deep crimson, indicating anger. "The Kathrani do not submit to examination by primitives, and the Kathrani may return to their ships," Catherine replied calmly. "The Emperor's safety is not negotiable." The standoff lasted 3 hours. Messages flew between the palace and the Kathrani vessels in orbit. Diplomats on both sides worked frantically to find a compromise. In the end, the ambassador relented. Though her scales remained that dangerous shade of red, Catherine's screening was thorough. She used devices and techniques that made the Kathrani security experts nervous. When one of them complained, she simply smiled and continued her work. "She has technology we have never encountered," the Kathrani security chief reported to the ambassador afterward. "Scanning methods that penetrate our standard countermeasures. I do not understand how such a young species could possess such capabilities." "Humans do not invent their technology from nothing," Seshrel replied. "They steal it, adapt it, improve it. They are scavengers of knowledge. It is their most dangerous quality." The diplomatic sessions began the following day. They took place in the Grand Council chamber with the full court in attendance. Emperor Kelthos sat on his throne, with Catherine standing silently at his side. Ambassador Sesriel coiled on a special platform designed to accommodate her serpentine body. For the first 4 days, the discussions focused on trade agreements and border disputes. The ambassador was brilliant. She twisted words with expert skill, making demands that sounded like concessions and offers that contained hidden traps. The Valorian diplomats struggled to keep up with her. Catherine watched everything. She noticed the way Seshrel's scales flickered when certain topics arose. She observed which members of the Catherine delegation grew tense during particular discussions. She tracked the patterns of eye contact and body language that revealed alliances and tensions within the foreign party. On the 5th day, the ambassador made her move. It happened during a formal dinner. The conversation had wandered to the topic of the emperor's lack of an heir. This was a sensitive subject. Kelthos suffered from a genetic condition that made it impossible for him to father children with other Valorians. Without an heir, the question of succession hung over the empire like a dark cloud. Ambassador Seshrel spoke with apparent innocence. "We have heard of your Radiance's unfortunate situation. It troubles us deeply. An empire without clear succession is an empire vulnerable to instability. Your concern is noted." The emperor replied carefully. "We wish to offer a solution." The ambassador's scales shifted to a soft, friendly green. "Our scientists have developed treatments for the genetic condition that afflicts you. With our medicine, you could father children with any species in the galaxy. The Kathrani Dominion offers this gift freely as a sign of our friendship." The court fell silent. The offer was extraordinary. If true, it would solve a problem that had plagued the empire for years. An heir would secure the future, stabilize politics, and strengthen the emperor's position. But Catherine saw the trap. Immediately, the treatment would require the emperor to travel to a Kathroni medical facility. He would be away from his palace, away from his guards, away from everything that protected him. Even if the procedure was genuine, even if no assassination was planned, the political damage would be severe. An emperor who depended on Kathroni technology for his heir would be an aid, an emperor who owed debts to a rival power. Catherine leaned close to the emperor's ear. She whispered for several seconds. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with understanding. "Ambassador," Kelthos said slowly, "your offer is extraordinarily generous. So generous, in fact, that I find myself wondering what the Kathrani hope to gain in return." Seshrel's scales flickered. "We seek only friendship, your radiance. Nothing more." "Of course, and yet my advisor tells me something interesting." The emperor paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your dominion faces certain economic pressures, does it not? The mining colonies in the Velthari sector have been producing below capacity for 3 years now. Your treasury is strained by military expenditures along the outer rim. A closer relationship with our empire would provide access to markets and resources that might ease these difficulties." Ambassador's expression did not change, but her scales went very still. This was not public information. The Kathrani had worked hard to hide their economic troubles from foreign eyes. "Your advisor is remarkably well informed," Seshrel said carefully. "She is human," the emperor replied. "They have a saying on Earth. There is no such thing as a free gift." The dinner continued, but the balance of power had shifted. Ambassador Seshrel had come to the palace expecting to outmaneuver a young emperor. She had not expected to face a human who had spent 30 years studying politics and negotiation in the most competitive environment in the galaxy. That night, the ambassador requested a private audience with Catherine. They met in a small chamber, alone except for 2 guards at the door. Seshrel coiled on her platform and studied the human with unblinking eyes. "You knew about our economic situation," the ambassador said without greeting. "That information is classified. Our own population does not know the full extent of our difficulties. How did you obtain it?" "I read your trade reports," Catherine replied simply. "They are public documents, published by your own government. Those reports show nothing unusual. They show a pattern. The numbers are slightly wrong in ways that would not attract attention individually. But when you analyze them together over several years, a picture emerges. Your exports exceed your production capacity. Your military spending exceeds your official budget. Your colony investments are funded by sources that do not appear in your financial records." Catherine shrugged. "Your analysts missed it because they were not looking for it. They assumed their own government was telling the truth. Humans are trained to assume that official reports are lies until proven otherwise. Sesharel was silent for a long moment. Her scales shifted through several colors before settling on a neutral gray. "You are a dangerous creature, Catherine Perry. I am a human. We are all dangerous creatures. We have had to be. And yet you choose to serve this emperor, a being from a species that looks down on your kind. Why?" Catherine considered the question carefully before answering. "Because he is a good ruler. Because he cares about his people more than his power. Because serving him allows me to protect millions of lives across hundreds of worlds." She paused. "And because humans believe in earning our place, your species and the Valorians, you have dominated this galaxy for thousands of years. Humanity is still new here. We have to prove ourselves. Serving the Emperor is how I prove what humans can be." The ambassador studied her for a long time. Then, slowly, her scales shifted to a color Catherine had not seen before. It was pale blue, almost white, like the sky on a clear winter day. "That color," Catherine said. "What does it mean?" "Respect," Sesharel answered. "It means respect." The diplomatic mission concluded 3 days later. The trade agreements were signed, though the medical treatment offer was quietly set aside. Ambassador Sesharel returned to her ship with her entourage, having gained less than she hoped, but having learned more than she expected as her vessel pulled away from the planet. She sent one final message to the palace. It was addressed to Catherine Perry. It said simply, "You would have made an excellent Kathrani." Catherine read the message and smiled. It was the highest compliment the ambassador could give, and she had earned it the human way. Through patience and persistence and refusing to be underestimated, the Emperor's court was beginning to change. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. The nobles were starting to see that humans were not primitives to be dismissed. They were something new in the galaxy, something that might change everything. And Catherine Perry was just the beginning. The final test came in. Catherine's 3rd year of service. It began with a conversation she overheard in a corridor. 2 minor officials were discussing a promotion that one of them had received. The conversation seemed innocent enough, but something about it caught Catherine's attention. The promoted official seemed nervous. He kept glancing around as if expecting someone to be listening. Catherine filed this observation away and continued her work. Over the following weeks, she noticed more small irregularities. A communications officer who had suddenly begun working late every night. A noble who had stopped attending court functions without explanation. A military supply officer who had recently purchased a new residence, far above his official salary. None of these things were connected in any obvious way. A Valorian investigator might have dismissed them as coincidence. But Catherine had learned long ago that coincidences were often anything but. She began to investigate quietly, telling no one, trusting no one. She tracked money flows through layers of false accounts. She monitored communication patterns between people who should have no reason to contact each other. She spent long nights reviewing security recordings, looking for patterns that others might miss. What she found was worse than anything she had imagined. A conspiracy had formed in secret, drawing together enemies of the Emperor from across the galaxy. The merchant consortium was involved, still seeking revenge for their earlier failures. Disgruntled nobles who resented the Emperor's reforms had joined the plot. Officers in the Imperial fleet who believed they could rule better than Kelthus had been recruited. Even agents of the Kathroni Dominion, despite the recent peace treaty, were providing support. It was the largest and most sophisticated assassination plot in Valorian history. Hundreds of people were involved, coordinated across multiple worlds by some of the finest minds in the galaxy. They had been planning for years, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection. Their target date was the Festival of Founding, the Empire's most important celebration. The Emperor would address the public from the Grand Plaza. Security would be stretched thin across the capital. The crowds would provide cover for the attackers. Catherine spent 6 months building her case. She traced every connection, identified every conspirator, mapped every element of the plan. She worked alone, sleeping only a few hours each night, pushing herself to the limits of human endurance. She could not risk telling anyone. The conspiracy had penetrated too deeply into the palace hierarchy. Any warning might reach the wrong ears. When she finally brought her evidence to the emperor, he was silent for a very long time. "You are certain of this?" he asked at last. His voice was steady, but his scales had gone pale. "Yes, Your Radiance. The coup is scheduled for the festival 12 days from now. They plan to strike during your public address." She handed him a data tablet containing her complete findings. The list of conspirators was long. It included names that made the emperor's jaw tighten: trusted advisors, childhood friends, officers he had personally promoted. The betrayal ran deeper than anything he had faced before.
Ow!
"Did you find all of this?" he asked. "My intelligence services detected nothing. Your intelligence services have been compromised. 3 of your senior analysts are part of the conspiracy." Catherine paused. "I found it because I do not trust systems. I watch people. Individual people, their behaviors, their patterns. The conspiracy was hidden from your official channels, but it could not hide from direct observation." The emperor studied the tablet for a long moment. Then he looked up at Catherine with an expression she could not quite read. "You have served me for 3 years. You have saved my life more times than I can count. You have never asked for anything, except the resources, to do your job." He paused. "Why?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "May I speak freely, Your Radiance?" "Always. When I first came to your court, I saw an empire that reminded me of every human civilization I had studied. The same ambitions, the same fears, the same capacity for greatness and cruelty. I saw nobles who schemed for power and servants who dreamed of better lives. I saw a ruler who wanted to do right, but was surrounded by those who would exploit that desire." She met his eyes steadily. "Humans have a complicated history. We have done terrible things to ourselves and to others, but we have also learned that the true measure of a civilization is how it treats those who cannot protect themselves. You, Your Radiance, have tried to build that kind of civilization. That is why I have stayed." The festival of founding arrived on schedule. The conspirators moved into position, confident that their plan remained undetected. They had spent years preparing for this moment. They had anticipated every possible response from the palace guard. They had calculated every variable. They had not calculated for a human. When the signal came to begin the assault, the soldiers who were supposed to seize the palace gates found their commanders already under arrest. The nobles who were supposed to create diversions at court discovered they were surrounded by guards they did not recognize. The communications officers who were supposed to cut the emperor's contact with his fleet learned that their equipment had been secretly replaced with dummy systems. The conspiracy collapsed in less than an hour. Over 400 people were taken into custody across the capital. The plotters and other star systems found Imperial warships waiting for them when they tried to move. Every element of the plan had been anticipated and countered. That evening, Catherine stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the festival fireworks light up the sky. The celebration continued below, the citizens cheering for their emperor. Unaware of how close they had come to chaos, the emperor joined her. Stepping out into the cool night air, "You allowed them to proceed almost to the moment of action," he observed. "You could have arrested them weeks ago." "I needed to identify everyone involved," Catherine explained. "Conspiracies are like infections. If you do not remove all the contaminated tissue, they grow back. By waiting until the last moment, I ensured that every conspirator revealed themselves. And now your empire is secure. For a time at least. There will always be others who want what you have, but they will think twice before moving against you. They will remember this night and wonder what else the human sees that they cannot." The emperor was quiet for a moment, watching the colors burst across the sky. "I chose better than I knew when I appointed you," he said finally. "You chose a human," Catherine replied. "That is all any of us are. We are creatures who learn to survive by being more stubborn and more clever than anything that tried to kill us. We do not give up. We do not forget. And we do not forgive those who threaten what we have sworn to protect." She turned to face him, and for a moment, the tired soldier showed through the calm professional mask. Your court fears me because they do not understand me. That is useful. Fear keeps enemies careful. But I want you to understand something. I am not magical or mysterious. I am simply human. And that means I will do whatever it takes, for as long as it takes, to keep my word. The fireworks continued to light the sky in patterns that had no names in any Valorian language. Below, the capital celebrated an empire that did not know how close it had come to falling in the weeks that followed. The story spread across the galaxy. The human who had single-handedly uncovered and destroyed a conspiracy that spanned star systems. The primitive creature who had out-hot the finest minds of ancient civilizations. The small, soft, weaponless being who had protected an emperor when armies of warriors had failed. Other empires began to take notice. Requests arrived at Earth's diplomatic offices, asking for human advisors, human security consultants, human observers. The galaxy was waking up to a truth that Catherine Perry had demonstrated through 3 years of patient, stubborn service. Humans were not primitives, stumbling onto the galactic stage. They were survivors of a brutal world, tempered by millennia of conflict, equipped with instincts and skills that no other species possessed. They were dangerous not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of something deeper. Something in their nature that refused to accept defeat. Catherine Perry stood beside the Emperor of 900 Worlds and watched the stars wheel overhead. She was 56 years old now, her hair showing streaks of gray, her body carrying the aches of old wounds and sleepless nights. But her eyes remained sharp, and her mind remained focused. This was what humanity offered to the galaxy. Not conquest. Not domination. Simply the promise that when a human gave their word, they would keep it, no matter the cost. No matter how long it took, no matter what stood in their way, the court still feared her. The Emperor still trusted her. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the enemies of order looked toward the Valorian Empire and hesitated. That was why the Galactic Emperor's sole bodyguard was human. And that was why it horrified his court, because they finally understood what they were dealing with.